Prime Minister has decreed on the basis of little evidence at the time, but in the scramble to try and get the evidence together, the ministers feel that they have to deliver on the Prime Minister's will, rather than actually stand up to him and say, hang on a minute, I think your knee-jerk reaction was the wrong one. Because all the people, including the vets who are concerned about this, are in something called the Dog Control Coalition. And it's made up of the RSPCA, Blue Cross, Battersea Dogs Home, Dogs Trust, Hope Rescue, the Scottish SPCA, the Royal Kennel Club and the British Veterinary Association. And what they say is the Dog Control Coalition agrees that urgent action needs to be taken to protect the public from out-of-control dogs, not specific breeds. But we are disappointed that the government hasn't taken the opportunity to completely overhaul the Dangerous Dogs Act. With its continued focus on specific breeds rather than a focus on prevention and implementation of tougher penalties for those owners not in control of their dogs, it is not fit for purpose. All those organisations to which I've referred say that this legislation is not fit for purpose, and yet the government isn't, on the present, unless we hear from something to the contrary from the Minister, is not even going to allow the House to have a vote on this legislation, so that members across the House can be held to account by their own constituents and can express their own view on whether they think this is good legislation or not. And even if the intention of the legislation is good, surely we should be looking at the detail, because we're talking about potentially new criminal penalties affecting people's freedom. And do we want to criminalise behaviour in people owning or handling dogs of a description which is so vague that they won't be certain in advance as to whether or not they will be offending against the law by not registering their dog as being an XL bully type of dog. So, Mr. Gray, this is, in my view, one of the worst pieces of legislation brought forward by this government, and that's quite a high bar to get over, actually, in my view, and having looked at the terms of what's happened since the 2019 general election. I must say, I thought my honourable friend, the member for Don Valley, introduced this debate in such a mild, rational way that he was going to probably be able to single-handedly persuade the government to think again. And my style is slightly different, perhaps, from his, but I hope that between us we will be able to persuade the government. And I suppose ultimately, because nothing can be changed unless the Prime Minister gives it his say-so, ultimately persuade the government and the Prime Minister to change its view on this. And listen to the voices of 600,000 plus people who've signed these petitions. Mr. Gray, you know, and I know, how difficult it is to get people to sign petitions. And to get 600,000 signatures is no mean feat. And I think that we will ignore that mass of opinion at our peril, unless we are able to show that we have done everything possible to examine alternative ways of dealing with this problem, introducing a proper safeguards in terms of definitions, and ultimately recognising the plea that there has been ever since the 1991 legislation, that we shouldn't legislate in haste, and that we should actually now deal with the underlying problem, which is just as bad as it's ever been, which is that there are a large number of dog owners who are, or a relatively small proportion of the total, but a significant number of dog owners who are themselves irresponsible. And some people talk about having a licensing system for dogs. Perhaps we should have a licensing system, Mr. Gray, for dog owners. And in the same way as we have a licensing system for car drivers. Why not a licensing system for dog owners? I put that forward as a proposition. I don't normally campaign in favour of more legislation and regulation, but as an alternative to the rotten legislation that we've got here, I put that forward as a reasonable alternative.